Welcome. You're listening to Sports Econ 101, the show where we discuss sports topics from a business perspective. I'm your host, Edward Browne. Now, my normal co-hosts aren't with me today. I'm hoping that FP Santangelo Jr. is going to join us. But until then, we are going to have a special guest, an old friend of mine, Chris Browne, who's a chartered financial analyst. And why are we having him on? Because he's going to talk about the NBA franchises and NFL franchises and the worth of them. At each commercial break, we're going to ask a sports trivia question, and the theme today is the World Series 7th game. And let's see how much our guest Chris Browne knows about 7th games of the World Series going back. Oh, let's see here. We got not too long. 1979 was the earliest question, so nothing from the 1920s or anything like that. All right, so we're going to talk about what's going on with the Suns ownership. Little bit maybe a Ben Simmons saga, see what's going on with that. Congressman from Illinois is asking for all documents and communications regarding the Washington football team and John Gruden. And I want to see what Chris Browne, our special guest, has to say about all that. All right. And also maybe you get into Patrick Mahomes' mom saying that interceptions are not Patrick's fault and should not be counted as interceptions. And I think she's got a point on that. All right, maybe we'll even get to about the fan giving back the 600 TV back to Tom Brady. All right, this segment of Sports Econ 101 is sponsored by Pacific Private Money, still providing mortgage investments that are currently yielding over 6%. Check them out. Doesn't get any more conservative than that. PacificPrivateMoney.com. Stay with us. You are listening to Sports Econ 101. When we come back, we're going to have our special guest, Chris Browne, who's a chartered financial analyst, to discuss NBA franchises, what's going on with the Suns ownership, and maybe we'll see a little bit about an NFL because Jeff Bezos has decided not to buy the Broncos. All right, don't touch that dial. We're going to be right back. Welcome back to Sports Econ 101. Again, I'm Edward Browne, your host. My co-hosts are not with me, but I have a special guest in the studio here, Chris Browne, to discuss NBA franchises. He's a chartered financial analyst. Chris, welcome to.
Great to have me. Thanks very much.
You're welcome. Okay, so I said on the previous segment about we're going to discuss NBA franchises and values and what's going on with ESPN and the owner and the Suns ownership. Take it away.
Well, so over this past weekend, some tweets came out that ESPN was working on a story regarding Phoenix Suns owner Robert Sarver. That he had engaged in sort of similar activity to Donald Sterling, in that there was potentially a genuine threat that the Suns might be sold or might have a forced sale.
Forced sale, yeah.
In the same way that Sterling was forced to sell the Clippers back in 2014, and the reason, a whole bunch of interest stuff, because it totally reset the valuation for NBA franchises. Nothing had traded over $1 billion before that particular point, and Ballmer came in with a $2 billion valuation for the Clippers, which I think all of the ownership groups were very happy to go see, and that valuation got locked in when the Houston Rockets were sold a couple of years later to Tillman Fertitta and his group for $2.2 billion. So these opportunities represent, or seem to represent, an opportunity for NBA owners, or could, for them to sort of reset franchise valuations. And I think it'll be very interesting to see how those things get set.
Yeah, let me ask you, when Donald Sterling had to sell, who set the price, right? I mean, because it wasn't so much that there was a big feeding frenzy on it.
No, I think it was a combination of a couple things. One is they had to come out with a takeout bid, because otherwise there was the risk of, a long, arduous lawsuit process. So it probably had to be a deal that would satisfy Sterling to go away, while at the same time, providing, a way for somebody to come in and bump up franchise valuations.
Before the Sterling situation, what was the highest price, that was paid for NBA?
Well, the Warriors had been purchased a couple of years earlier. I think it was in 2011, and that was for $450 million, and it was between the Lake of Goober group that won it and Larry Ellison. Larry wasn't going to go above $400 million at that particular point. There may have been another team sold, for around that figure in between.
I wonder what the Warrior value is now.
They're up in that $2 billion valuation.
I think so.
Also because they have their own arena, right? So some of these when you're looking at these things, you got to look at what's sort of included, because that can sort of muddy the waters a bit. But I don't think that the Clippers have, maybe they have half the Staples Center along with the Lakers, but that's still not the whole arena. And so you have to look at what's the total package, and if there's an arena included. That's sort of why, for example, the Dallas Cowboys have such a great valuation, because that stadium is part of the entire entire, or is included in the entire franchise.
And with all the supply chain being slowed down, I don't know of anyone who could even build a stadium for the next 10 years.
Well, not in California, but it'll all be very interesting. They've got a decent arena down in Phoenix. It's they were in the NBA finals this last year, so the valuations can be pretty good. But Chris Paul's not getting any younger, and they didn't sign DeAndre Ayton to an extension. They'll still have his bird rights and some other things, but they didn't get it done when they had exclusive negotiating rights with him. So it'll be interesting to see how that all, from just the contractual and on the court stuff, how that plays out over the next year and a half.
Yeah, it's just the thing that's kind of hard is all this social justice situation where, who decides what crosses the line? I mean, at some point you're gonna have a thought police too, right?
Well, to me, that it more feeds into viewership numbers and getting back to valuation around media packages and things like that. So, viewership has been down for the NBA. It's been down across most sports platforms. And the NBA TV contract is coming up in about 18 months here, and they're looking for a big bump. They're looking, roughly at a $75 billion package, and possibly extending out over a few years. So this last package, I believe, was for roughly $40 billion, and it was a 7-year package.
Yeah, what's interesting is this whole COVID thing. I think people assumed one situation and it turned out not to be. As an example, there was the assumption, well, if people are home much, they're going to start having a lot more kids. But I think this whole COVID thing kind of suppressed the libidos, let's put it that way, of both male and female, right? And then you think also, okay, well, if people are staying home, I mean, guys love sports, so they're going to be wanting to just, watch sports all the time. But I think there's a big part of the fact that if there's no fans, and I felt that too, watching games and going, there's just something about not hearing the fans. And then when you try to pump it in and they have pictures of people and stuff, it's like, this isn't the same thing.
Well, and I think it affected the players on the court too. I mean, all of it was pretty suboptimal. They tried to soldier through the best way that they thought they could, but I think everybody's glad to have folks back in the stands and hopefully settling things back down to a more normal routine.
Which is kind of interesting that Andrew Wiggins for the Warriors, he kept holding off on getting the vaccine, and then they basically said, well, you can't play any home games, or probably even in Brooklyn, because of the rules that the city had mandated. Now, Kyrie Irving, and nobody seemed to protest, but apparently now Kyrie Irving, well, let's go back. So Wiggins decided, what, there's too much money on the table. I want to increase my family. I'm just going to go ahead, bite the bullet, take the vaccine. But Kyrie still has held off as of today, and people are protesting because they want to see him play. Let him play, let him play. And,
yeah, well, I mean, certainly for vaccine mandates in New York and California and other parts of the league are going to take this on. I think the best person that I've seen on it talk about it was Jonathan Isaac, who I thought got some good play and gave a very eloquent.
Go ahead, tell the audience what he said.
Well, just basically his stance was, hey, look, I've had COVID. My understanding through talking with my health professionals is that this vaccine won't, prevent me from getting it again, and I probably have better immunity, natural immunity, than having to take the vaccine. And given my age and stage in life and what I think the risks are relative to having an adverse effect from the vaccine, I choose not to take the vaccine. And
that is, and you said it very eloquently too, I mean, because you think about it, and I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but I kind of feel very similar to what he's saying. I mean, because I believe I had it pretty much before anybody, because I had it back in January of 2020 before anybody even knew what it was. And been kind of, I mean, I got over it very, very quickly. I'd be more concerned that the vaccine might open oneself up to the variant or some new variant versus just allow the natural antibodies to do, and nobody really knows. That's the thing. Hey, tell you what, let's get to our break. I know you're ready to say something. Let's
I'm good now.
Back on that. Okay. And again, like I said, I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but I kind of believe in leaving people alone if they need to be left alone. Okay. Here's our first trivia question. We're talking 7th game of the World Series. The winning team in the 7th game of the 1997 World Series was also the first wild card team to win the series. Which team are we talking about? Call, actually, you know what, don't call. Email Edward at sportsecon101.com the answer to this question. The winning team in the 7th game of the 1997 World Series was also the first wild card team to win the series. Which team was it? All right, stay with us. You're listening to Sports Econ 101. We're going to be right back. Welcome back to Sports Econ 101. Edward Browne here along with my special guest, Chris Browne, which, by the way, he spells his name with an E at the end, so we're not related. All right, the winning team in the 7th game of the 1997 World Series was also the first wildcard team to win the series. Which team are we talking about, Mr. Browne?
We are talking the Florida Marlins.
Florida Marlins, yeah. That was before they became the Miami Marlins. I like Florida Marlins better. Miami Marlins just doesn't roll off the tongue like Florida Marlins,
They wanted to get greater local involvement, so they switched over to Miami.
And that's probably why the California Angels changed to Los Angeles Angels, which is because they
of Anaheim, by the way.
That's right. Yeah, and they actually used to be the LA Angels like back in the 60s, I think.
That is correct.
That's correct. Yeah, you know your sports, so
back in the Gene Mock days, baby.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah. So, let's continue on with this. We're talking a little business here. So let's kind of shift over. So here you get this congressman from Illinois asking for all documents and communications regarding the Washington football team and John Gruden. And we're talking, I don't know, 600,000 emails or something. A, doesn't Congress have enough on their plate? B, how about letting the commissioner handle it? What are your thoughts on all that?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that are going on there. One is, if you're asking me to look at this from from more of a political perspective, I think that there were people that were a little circumspect about how all of this was handled with Gruden, why it came out, when it did, how it did. And I think that there are folks who are, more than a little upset that this kind of stuff is coming out. That it was, 11-year-old emails between him and Bruce Allen.
Yeah, private emails so long ago. I mean,
the GM. I mean, it doesn't, but that, I think that's where that's where it comes from. Does Congress have better things to do? Yeah, probably. but certainly I think that's where the impetus is coming from.
I wonder how much of it has to do with the fact that it's Washington, since it's Washington, D.C., versus like if it was, the Kansas City Chiefs or, the Tampa Bay Bucks, or Jacksonville, Florida, Jaguars.
Well, I think if there was a release of emails for any team that resulted in the firing of a head coach and under the same sort of circumstances, it quite possibly. I mean, there's sort of two things that are going on. One is that there's an investigation very similar to what we were talking about in the first segment of the Washington football team, its ownership. Were there racist, sexist, misogynistic kind of culture going on there? with the idea of trying to pressure Daniel Snyder to get him out of the league. That could be a possibility,
Good
right?
point. Very good point.
And then you've got what is, I think, again, according to Forbes, the third most valuable NFL franchise in play. And what's that worth? And the power of having a local DC franchise, and who would, all of those things. I mean, it's had only 2 owners in the last, since the 70s, right? So it's just been Jack Kent Cooke and Daniel Snyder. That ownership or that franchise does, is you probably, have tremendous sort of prestige within the Beltway. So it'll be interesting to see how that, certainly how that all plays out. And
I wonder if they're going to come up with a team name. I mean, they could be the Washington Senators, I mean, even St. Louis used to have the Cardinals baseball and football team.
I think they're happy with football team. We'll see what we'll see.
That's the thing, is you have to choose something that nobody would, how about the Tiger Lilies or something passive,
I don't think you'll get a fan. I don't think you'll get a fan base.
No, they could do the Washington Hogs, right? Because they used to call the front line.
They could do that.
Yeah. But then they might say, well, that there's something to do with fat people or something. It's like you can't please everyone.
You're fat shaming if you use hogs.
Yeah, probably.
Animal appropriation.
Yeah, I mean, anyway. Hey, looking at this. Okay, so Tom Brady throws a 600 TD pass, and Mike Evans goes ahead and just without thinking, because I mean, who would know while you're playing football? Oh, by the way, this is going to be the 600 TD, right? So he just gave it to a fan. And then it's figured out very quickly, hey, wait, that was the 600th TD. And you can see somebody, and I'm not sure who's the one person who asked for it back, probably someone on the squad.
It was someone on the staff. Someone on the staff, and they worked out a deal. They worked out a deal with the fan and got the football back for Brady.
Yeah, and it's interesting because people are. I mean, I'm trying to imagine if I were in the stands, I don't know if I'd really think about the significance per se, except for, oh, this is a nice memento. Oh yeah, of course, sure, here it is. And then hope, oh, okay, well, can I get something, right? And so I can't really blame the fan, but some people are kind of going, what an idiot, that thing was worth $500,000, and apparently Brady is offering to give him 1 Bitcoin, which is 63,000, just isn't bad, and maybe sign some stuff.
People have an overinflated view about what sports memorabilia, is worth in the moment. If you want to, would it have been worth, some, a nice couple $1,000 worth of, chunk of change in a few years? Yeah, maybe. But I mean, come on, people.
Oh, I know. And also it's like, and it's so funny how people like this football versus another one I've got in my hand that wasn't actually the one that was thrown, I mean, it's really same thing, it could be baseball or whatever.
That's the whole sports memorabilia market is the idea of provenance and all those things. And that was the ball that did it, and the authentication of those things and that whole bit. So, no, I think it was great. I think to me, the bigger Brady story is when he went up to the kid that with brain cancer and gave him the hat and the gloves and all that stuff and just made that kid's day, month, week, whatever. I mean, that
who knows how I remember the kid, did he beat cancer? Is that what it was?
He's battling. He's battling cancer. I don't know if he's beaten it, but certainly for a kid who's going through that and Tom to take the time out to do that, I think that was
from a science standpoint, you really wonder health wise, it's like that. I mean, that kid could just beat it just because of that. I mean, it's amazing the power of your mind to get so excited with the endorphins of, being a kid and go, oh my gosh, Tom Brady, this is awesome. I really like what Mookie, but we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. And I don't remember the player, but it was his first hit and it was a home run and it was over Mookie Betts' head basically. And when Mookie found out, I mean, I guess he realized, oh, this is this kid's first hit. He looked up to the stands and he asked for the ball back and basically said, hey, listen, don't worry, I'll take care of you. And so the fan just trusted Mookie and went ahead and tossed him the ball. They gave the ball to the player. And sure enough, the next inning going out there, Mookie brings a bat and signs it, and kind of a nice little trade off. Because, I mean, the guy's first home run, I mean, that's not going to be worth
Yeah.
500,000 like this 600 TD ball. But I thought it was really classy. He's just a really real class act.
Even for a Dodger, he's a good guy.
Even for a Dodger, yeah. Talking about a big Giants fan here and Mr. Chris Browne. And remember, we are a national show, so we try not to do too much of the home team. But of course, we've got to, kind of give it all, sort of spread the wealth, so to speak. And I've talked about this last week, or I tried to talk about it and didn't have enough time. So I'm going to get into it now. Patrick Holmes' mom says interceptions that are not Patrick's fault should not be counted as interceptions. And it's funny because, you can think about it. She kind of has a point. I mean, if he throws a ball that should have been caught by a wide receiver, and for some reason he just bobbles it and then gets intercepted, unfortunately, that's counted as an interception. And
I don't know how you're going to judge that one. I mean, again, because it's where's the ball supposed to be? Is the ball on him? Is he tipping it because they're reaching for it and these are going off fingertips?
Yeah.
Are they, there's a whole series of factors that go into it. I totally understand the hard luck of the hard luck factor within it, but so long as they're counting them all, every quarterback's interceptions the same way, I'm good with it.
Well, that's true. And also, if he throws like a screen pass for let's say 5 yards, and it turns out it's an 80-yard touchdown, doesn't he get credited for an 80-yard?
He gets credit for 80 yards of passing. That's
he gets
all the yak yards. I mean, I think the bigger thing for this year for Mahomes is just one, how many he's throwing. And how low is his rating? I mean, this has been several weeks in a row. He's down at around a 75 quarterback rating.
Yeah.
And throwing out of different arm slots, which was great, but he's been forcing a lot of throws, and that was the concern when he was coming out of Texas Tech. And I think the big question folks are asking is how and why is he reverting back to this?
Well, now after that big hit. Even though I don't know how he didn't break his neck, get a concussion out of that. That was just scary, is what it was. But also, it's like if he throws an 80-yard pass and it's incomplete, but there's pass interference, he gets credited for a complete.
No, they only get the penalty yards. He doesn't get the penalty yards. So he doesn't get. That's not a completion. They
don't count that as a completion. Okay.
Penalty yards.
Okay. Well, there you go. All right. So here's our second trivia question. Who was the winning pitcher in the 7th game of the 2001 World Series? You know that one too?
I think I do.
Okay. We'll see when we get back. All right. Email Edward at sportsecon101.com the answer to this question. Who was the winning pitcher in the 7th game of the 2001 World Series? Stay with us. Sports Econ 101 will be right back. Welcome back to Sports Econ 101. I'm Edward Browne, along with my co-host for today, special guest, Chris Browne. Again, no relation. Chris has an E at the end of his name.
Brother from another mother.
Brother, yeah, that's right. In fact, I asked my dad how come we couldn't have an E at the end of our name, and he said he couldn't afford it back then. All right, here's our second trivia question. Who was the winning pitcher in the 7th game of the 2001 World Series? And Chris, you know the answer, and give us the explanation as to why.
Well, so 2001, that was right after 9/11, and so that was Yankees Diamondbacks. Everybody was geeked up for it. Giuliani was there doing his thing, and lots of pride. Bush threw out the first pitch that was huge in the beginning of that series, so it was Yankees Diamondbacks. It all came down to the 7th game. It all came down to late innings in the 7th game, and Randy Johnson came in to sort of shut it down. I think it was Luis Gonzalez got the game-winning hit in that game. So
yes, very good. I like that. So far you're batting 667. That's not bad at all. We'll see.
What did I miss?
Yeah, well. Oh, I'm sorry. You're actually batting 1,000 so far. We haven't asked the third question.
2 for 2. We're gonna.
My bad.
I think somebody here's the math guy.
Yeah, I know. I'm looking at him all. Well, he's got 2 out of 3 so far, so that's 667. Oh boy, I'm glad you put me in my place. Um, okay, let's see here. So the Major League Baseball is going to start requiring all teams to provide housing for its minor league players next season. Right now, AAA players are only making $700 a week.
Yeah,
It's tough.
it's not being in the show. You ride the bus.
Yeah.
Bus takes. I mean, it's yeah, it's a very tough life, and so that when you see and hear these of these guys who come up to the show to play, and they've been in the big leagues for 6, 7, 8, 9 years. I mean, it's a grind. You don't make any money unless you know you've signed something big up front, or you're an early round draft pick, or any of those kinds of things. You might get, and you got Scott Boras as your agent, maybe. But
Yeah.
for most of those guys, it's a slog.
Yeah, it's interesting because here in San Rafael, small town in just north of San Francisco, we had it's an international league, independent, excuse me, not international, independent pro baseball. And they literally were asking the townspeople, hey, if you can put these people up, let them sleep in your den, or for a while, that'll help, because I mean, I don't think they were making even $700 a week.
Yeah, no, that
Oh,
Eric Burns was playing with that team for a little
that's
while over
right.
there in San Rafael. Yeah, he
Yeah,
after he
yeah,
retired, he would cruise over there and play a few games.
yeah. And he had signed a fairly good sized contract. No, wait, he played for the A's and then Diamondbacks, right?
A's and Diamondbacks, and then he went, and then he was he's done a lot of work for MLB Network and stuff like that. And after he had retired, he'd go play games over in San Rafael with that team.
And so did Spaceman Bill Lee, because
There
Bill
you go.
Lee had grown up here, and he actually got to pitch in the '75 World Series, which was a very exciting World Series with Carlton Fisk hitting Game 6.
Yep.
He's trying to get the ball to go fair, and he became the oldest pitcher. I think he was 65 years old to win a game in professional baseball, because they still consider it professional, even though it's independent. I'm thinking 65 years old, and I don't know how many innings he threw, but it was a lot. I mean,
Well, there was a great story about Nolan Ryan. Because he'd go to like the University of Texas and throw, and he could still bring heat. I mean, and folks would ask him, they'd say, "Express, how come, why aren't you pitching anymore?" And he says, because nobody wants somebody that can pitch only every 10 days.
good point.
He's just old and tired and sore. So
Yeah, no, that's a really good point.
I mean, you can bring it. It's the idea, what is it? I'm not as good as I once was, but I'm as good once as I ever was.
Oh, I haven't heard that. That's good. It's so funny because I had Billy Bean on, general manager of the A's, a few years ago, and I really appreciate it because he doesn't usually come on to shows and do interviews. But I remember kind of teasing him a little bit, just saying, Billy, I'd like to try out for the team. I can throw in the high 60s. He wasn't impressed.
No.
I figured, okay, every pitch will be off speed, and I might strike. I'm not going to strike anybody out, but I might throw one past somebody because they'll be expecting a fastball.
That's like Rick Russell when he pitched for the
yeah.
Cubs and the Giants. He had 2 pitches, slow and slower.
Yeah. We must have had. I mean, he wasn't a bad pitcher, so he must have had. I mean,
Big Daddy was a great pitcher.
Yeah.
He knew how to change speeds, and like I said, he was the perfect changeup guy, and
Yeah.
would and had
Paint
that
the corners,
motion
maybe.
that just would fool you. So he was a great pitcher for both the Cubs and the Giants.
Yeah, it's funny. It reminds me when we were mentioning about Nolan Ryan. Yeah, if you ever see the movie Cobb, I believe Tommy Lee Jones plays Ty Cobb, and he goes. I think he's in Vegas one time. This is like 1960 or something. And he's just in the audience watching a comedy, some kind of act, and and the MC finds out that Ty Cobb is in the audience, and so he goes, "Hey, we got the great Ty Cobb here. Come on up." And so Ty Cobb goes on stage, and he asks him. He says, "Oh, what do you think of these pitchers nowadays?" He goes, "They're a bunch of candy blanks." And he says, "Well, really?" He goes, "What do you think you could hit against these guys?" He goes, "About 280." And he goes, really, 280? He goes, you know, you were a 365 or 375 hitter. He goes, 280, that's not really that great. And he goes, I'm 65 years old. What do you think? I love that. That's a great one. In fact, it's funny you mentioned about Rick Rushell. It was the opposite for Walter Johnson. He said he'd throw a fastball. If that didn't work, he'd throw a faster one.
Yeah.
You know? In
No,
fact, there was a story about his catcher one time. It was like this is before they had lights going on in stadiums, and the sun was starting to go down, and Walter was like still in his windup, and the catcher goes like that in his mitt, and the umpire strike. Oh, I love those
They
stories.
believe it. Yeah, exactly.
Hey, moving on. One thing more about basketball. What's going on with Ben Simmons? That's saga continues, huh?
So I mean, look, Ben's trying to figure it out. I think Philadelphia's trying to figure it out. Daryl Morey asked for way too much. The challenge for Ben is that he can't hit his free throws down the stretch, and he doesn't have much of a mid-range game, or a three-point game. And he took a lot of heat in the playoffs last year. A lot of folks don't feel that, or there are folks who don't feel that Simmons and Embiid can play together alongside one another. And then the question becomes, what kind of deal can you get for a guy like Ben Simmons?
Yeah.
And right now, you know, as Daryl Morey has been saying, basically their best offers are for draft picks and role players, and they're trying to win a championship. So, you know, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I don't know if I would have advised Ben to quite have, you know, played it out like he is playing it out.
Yeah.
But you know, they're going to be stuck here. I think the NBA season this year, I think is going to be really interesting. It's very wide open, given what Kyrie's situation with the Nets, Simmons' situation with the Sixers. There's no clear-cut favorite. I don't think Russ fits with the Lakers.
Yeah.
Or at least they got a lot of figuring out to do, and they're clearly frustrated right now. So I think it's pretty wide open. Utah could be a big player in all this. They shoot the three really well.
Well, it's still very early. You know, what are we? You know, less than 10 games into the season. You know.
Yeah, it's going to take a while for fit, and inevitably there are going to be more injuries, and how teams and you know, and team depth is going to come into it as you go through the campaign. But you know, my guess is Ben comes to Sacramento, and the question is sort of, you know, what does Sacramento give up to make that happen? Can they do a package around Buddy Hield and a couple of others, because Halliburton is not tradable. They don't want to trade. They love Davion Mitchell and Fox. So we'll see how it all comes together.
How much is Ben? There's FP on the phone, and I'm going to tell him I'm going to have to call him right back. He'll have to join us for the last 2 minutes or something. So that's just so funny. How much is Ben supposed to be making this year?
Well, I think he's 2 years through a 4-year extension, so he's got in the low 30s. I think is on his contract. It's like 32, 33. He's actually comparable. But this was all the talk before in terms of the Warriors picking him up. Do you trade Wiggins and maybe a few other pieces, a couple of one or two rookies and draft picks? That was what was being asked for, you know, around the draft and right after the draft. Yeah. Was you know, some package like that. Salary wise, he's pretty close to what Wiggins is making. Yeah. But I think Wiggins gives you, you know, as much defensively. Ben's one of the best defensive players, but on the offensive side of the ball, Andrew gives you a lot more. You know, although there are folks that are upset with Andrew's contract, so you can't make anybody happy.
Yeah. No, you can't. Right. Any predictions for the World Series now that it's down to the two teams?
Astros in 5.
Astros in 5. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, they've been there before. I think they've got I think they got a better team, and I think you know, as long as Dusty doesn't mess it up, the Astros should win this one pretty straightforward.
Now, is there still a lot of bad feelings out there from the fan base because of all the cheating scandals from a couple of years ago, and it seems like maybe people are saying, well, you know what, there's still some cheating going on.
Well, you got to prove it. Look, if you find it, great, knock it out. But I think do the Dodgers have a gripe from back a couple years ago? Yes. Does anybody do you carry that forward into now? Come on, let's play ball and see who the better team is.
Okay. And do you think Kyler Murray's going to take the Cardinals?
Arizona looks tough. I certainly didn't expect them to look this good this early in the season. Murray's looking very good, delivering the football really well, been very accurate with the football. That defense has been awesome. So I mean, when you're putting up 30 points a game, and your defense is with Chandler Jones and some of these other folks that are on that D line. They're going to be tough in what's a tough NFC West, and we'll see if the injury bug bites them, but they're looking pretty good.
You know what? Back to the Astros. I think I would want them in 5, maybe even a sweep, because the thing is, I don't like the Braves with that stupid tomahawk chop and ooh, and it's funny with all of the politically correct stuff out there. How come that hasn't been banned?
They've tried a few times.
I'm sure they have. Just like in Seattle, they tried to ban the wave. Remember that? That's where it started.
Well, there are people who have very strong opinions about the wave.
Yeah. Yeah, it takes away from the I think it's kind of cute, actually. Okay, here's our third trivia question about 7th game of the World Series. 1979 was the year of the Pirates and We Are Family song, the song you couldn't avoid if you watched very much baseball that year. Who hit the home run that put them ahead to stay in the 7th game against the Orioles?
Okay.
All right. Email Edward at sportsecon101.com the answer to that question. Don't touch that dial. Sports Econ 101. We'll be right back with some closing comments. Welcome back to Sports Econ 101. Last time for today, I'm Edward Browne, along with my special guest, chartered financial analyst, Chris Browne, who's going to join us in the future because he knows a lot about sports. Third trivia question, 1979 was the year of the Pirates and We Are Family song that you couldn't avoid if you watched baseball very much that year. Who hit the home run that put them ahead to stay in the 7th game against the Orioles?
Well, so the 3 guys that could do it, it was either Stargell at first, Parker, who was in right field, or Matlock at third. I'm going to go with Old Man Willie.
Yes, bing, ding, 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 ding. That is correct. Old Man Willie Stargell. In fact, when we were kids, we used to emulate his,
his windup. He rolled the bat through.
Yeah.
Actually, it was the lefty swing. So he rolled the bat through this way.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And then it's funny because if Dave Parker, unfortunately, toward the end of his career, he wasn't playing that well. Obviously, he was an older man.
He had some great years for the A's after that.
He did, and boy, I'll tell you, if you go back to highlights and watch him throw out people from right field,
he had that throw in the All-Star. It was the All-Star game.
That's right.
The All-Star game that year that he uncorked one.
He kind of took over for Roberto Clemente. His right.
That was amazing. And that, by the way, that was the only year that the Pirates used those hats.
With the stripe,
with the little rings around them.
Around them. Yeah. Hey, tell you what. Okay, here's our thoughts for the day. My landlord says he needs to come to talk to me about how high my heating bill is. I told him my door is always open. Yeah. And did you hear about the man who fell into an upholstery machine? No, don't worry, he's fully recovered. All right, tune in next week. We always come up with these dad jokes. All right, tune in next week to Sports Econ 101. We'll be discussing sports topics from a business perspective and asking more sports trivia questions. Thanks for listening. On behalf of our team, I'm your host, Edward Browne. We'll see you next week. So long.